How's it going, fellas? We're finally back with the 6th installment of the most shocking NBA Statline series. So, for those who are unfamiliar with this series, I basically show you some of the weirdest, most shocking box score stat lines throughout NBA history. It's been a long time since I made one of these, but I'll put the links to the previous videos in the description below. Alright, let's get started. Tony Snell. On February 24th, 2017, Tony Snell had one of the strangest stat lines ever, and we have seen it before a few times, but it's still very rare. In over 28 minutes of playing time in a game against the Utah Jazz, Snell recorded 0 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, and 0 blocks. It was almost like he was never on the floor. Sure, he might have set some good screens or dived for some loose balls or something that didn't show up in the box score, but for the most part, he didn't contribute anything to the stats. And his plus-minus for that game was -10. Also, he only attempted 2 shots, so he was barely involved in the offense. My guess is that because Snell's game is based around coming off of picks and shooting threes, the Jazz probably defended him off the ball very well in this game, so he might have just had trouble getting open. It's still pretty funny though that he couldn't record a single stat. We've seen something similar happen before with Derek Fisher, where he also had a 0-0-0 stat line in 34 minutes, but he did record 2 steals, which was better than what Snell provided. Next up, we got Ramon Sessions. Sessions is a player who most people don't really care about. For his entire career, he's usually been a solid role player, although in recent years he hasn't been great. But what if I told you that Ramon Sessions once recorded 24 assists in a single game? And he did it when he was a rookie. Out of everyone in NBA history who recorded 20 or more assists in a single game, Sessions was the youngest player to ever do it. His 24 assists also ties for the 6th most since 1983. That's ridiculous, especially since it's, well, Ramon Sessions. But what's even crazier is that he only played 17 games in his rookie season because he spent most of the year in the D-League and recovering from injury. The 20-point, 24-assist game happened in only his 16th game of his entire NBA career, and only his 6th game as a starter. He was also the 56th overall pick in the 2007 draft, and I believe he still holds the Bucks franchise record for most assists in a single game. This game from him was just insane, considering all of the circumstances. Next, we've got Boban Marjanovic. So we got a more recent one on this list. On April 3rd, in a game between the Clippers and Spurs, Boban scored 8 points on 0 field goal attempts. He went 0 for 0 from the field and 8 for 10 from the free throw line. This has only happened 2 other times in NBA history, where a player scored at least 8 points on 0 shots. It's pretty interesting, and I think if anyone was capable of pulling this off, it would be Boban. Every time he enters the game, he changes everything. If he doesn't get double teamed in the post, he's usually getting a bucket or getting fouled. The problem is, he's really slow with poor stamina, which is why he never gets that many minutes. Defensively, he can't stay in front of anybody, not even the slowest bigs in the league. Boban's also one of my favorite players because he's just really unique. He's gotta be the biggest double-edged sword in the entire league. He's pretty much unguardable in the paint, but on the other end, it's way too easy to take advantage of him in a mismatch. But yeah, that was a cool stat line. We barely ever see things like that. Chris Webber. Some of you might have heard about this game before. It's been talked about on Inside the NBA. Basically, Webber scored 51 points, which is great, but what's shocking is the number of shots he took. Yeah, he took 47 shots. Since 1983, that ties for the 3rd highest number of shots in a single game, behind only Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. In this game, he had a ton of offensive rebound tips, which count as shot attempts, so that had a lot to do with it. Still, 47 shots is absurd. Even Michael Jordan only had 1 game of his career where he shot more than Webber. And that was in 1993 where he scored 64 points. The difference is, Webber barely got to the free throw line. 6 free throw attempts is ridiculously low for the number of shots he took. Regardless, this was still one of the best games of his career. Webber scored 51 out of the team's total of 91 points. But the Kings still managed to lose the game. Webber went 24 of 47 from the field, but the rest of his team was only 15 of 59. Ouch. The game even went into overtime with a final score of 93-91. Yeah, it was basically your typical game from the early 2000s. Next up, Corey Brewer. Throughout his career, Brewer was always known as an energy player. He hustles, he dives for loose balls, he always gets out on the break, and sometimes he drives people nuts. Like when he goes 1-on-3 in transition, or when he misses every single wide open 3. On April 11th, 2014, Brewer registered a career-high 51 points. It was against the Houston Rockets, who, at the time, were not great defensively, and Dwight Howard was sitting out this game. There's still no excuse to let Corey Brewer drop 51 points, especially since most of his points came from layups and easy transition buckets. I also think it's funny that the Rockets traded for Brewer just one season later, and when Brewer came to Houston, his game dropped off and didn't play as well as the team expected. Oh well, for a moment there, he looked unstoppable, but it was just a flash in the pan. It's definitely one of the most shocking 50-point games ever. His final stat line was 51 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, and 6 steals. And finally, last but not least, we have Draymond Green. On February 10th, 2017, Green recorded a stat line that was shockingly close to a quadruple-double. And it would have been the first one since David Robinson in 1994, although it's possible Tim Duncan might have got one in the 2003 finals, but it was controversial. Either way, I believe Green was the closest to achieving it since then. He recorded 4 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, 10 steals, and 5 blocks. He was only 6 points away. It's a weird stat line to look at. Draymond is one of those guys who can impact the game so much, even without scoring. Very few players in NBA history could do that. He falls into a similar category as guys like Dennis Rodman, Ben Wallace, or Andrei Kirilenko. I know Draymond gets a lot of hate from many different fan groups for his antics, but you gotta admit, he's a unique player. There's nobody in the league right now who can do what he does, and this stat line is the epitome of who he is. And that's all, folks. Those were 6 more shocking NBA stat lines. The previous parts are in the description below, so you can check them out if you want. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if I should continue this series. Thank you everyone so much for watching, thanks for all the support, and I'll see you next time. Peace.